She yelled at the top of her voice. "Put your hands where I can see them." The so-called HOA officer aimed his gun at my wife like we were criminals in our own yard. Neighbors stood frozen, watching from their porches. I wanted to intervene, but my wife's composed expression stopped me instantly. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. That man had no clue who he was aiming his weapon at. The leader of the fake squad barked, "You're trespassing on HOA property. We determine who lives here." His voice was filled with false authority, trying to intimidate us. My wife tilted her head slightly, as if she were analyzing every move he made. She let out a quiet laugh, almost too soft to hear, and whispered to me, "He has no training. Look at his stance." The neighbors murmured, some pulling out their phones. Others too frightened to breathe. I saw the man's hand tremble on the trigger. He wanted control, but my wife stood taller. The words dealt a force across her shirt, bold and unwavering. He sneered, "One more word and I'll arrest you both." That's when she finally spoke, her voice sharp and steady. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." The silence that followed made even the birds stop. He thought he had the power, but he didn't know he was standing in front of someone who had trained soldiers tougher than him to fight wars he could never imagine. The fake officer waved his hand, and 3 more men in black vests with large yellow HOA letters rushed forward. They spread out like some kind of SWAT team, but anyone with real experience could see their errors. Their grips were sloppy, their steps uneven. My wife's eyes tracked every single one of them like she was already planning out the fight in her head. One of them shouted, "On the ground now." A neighbor gasped, clutching her child, and yelled, "This is insane." They didn't do anything. But the fake officer snapped back, "Stay out of this. We control this neighborhood." His voice cracked as he tried to sound powerful. My wife slowly raised her hands, not in surrender, but in control. "So this is what you call authority?" she asked. Her words cut like glass. The leader smirked. "Lady, you're about to discover who's in charge." I saw her glance at me, and that look told me everything. She wasn't worried. She was waiting. I knew that look from before. The same look she gave right before kicking down a door overseas. Then out of nowhere, one of the fake officers tried to grab her arm. That's when the first twist happened. Her hand moved so fast I barely saw it. In a single motion, she twisted his wrist, sent his fake badge clattering to the ground, and pushed him back into the grass. The whole block gasped. The leader's face went pale. He pointed his gun closer at her chest. But instead of fear, she stepped forward and smiled. The street fell into stunned silence. Neighbors' phones were up now, recording everything. The fake officer's finger twitched near the trigger, but my wife's voice cut through the air before he could act. "You don't even know how to hold that weapon," she said calmly. "And if you pull it, you'll never get another chance." The man froze, his confidence slipping. One of the other fake officers whispered nervously, "Boss, maybe we should back off," but the leader snapped, "Shut up. She's bluffing." Bluffing. He had no idea. My wife took one step closer, her eyes locked on his. For the first time, I saw fear in his face, not hers. She leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "You're pointing that at someone still on active duty." Delta Force. His jaw dropped. He blinked, trying to process her words. "That's impossible," he stammered. But then she shifted her stance, sharp, precise, military perfect, and every real soldier watching online later would know instantly she wasn't lying. A neighbor called out, "Wait, she's military?" Another shouted, "This whole HOA squad is fake." I knew it. The leader's grip shook. He tried to steady his hand, but the crowd was already turning. What he thought was power was slipping away fast, and my wife hadn't even touched him yet. And then came the moment that turned everything upside down. Real sirens in the distance closing in fast. Red and blue lights flashed against the houses as real patrol cars sped into the neighborhood. The sound of sirens cut through the tension like a blade. For a split second, the fake officer leader's confidence collapsed. He lowered his gun just a little, panic flashing across his face. Neighbors rushed closer shouting, "They're not real police." They tried to arrest her. Phones were raised high, capturing every second. The fake squad looked at each other, lost, like kids caught in a lie too big to cover. One of them muttered, "We need to get out of here." But the leader barked, "No one moves." His voice cracked, desperation creeping in. He turned back to my wife, snarling, "If you say one word to the real police, you'll regret it." But she didn't flinch. She leaned forward, slightly, and said loud enough for the crowd to hear, "You're finished." Every camera here caught you impersonating law enforcement. The first real cruiser skidded to a stop. Two officers jumped out with weapons drawn, but not at us, at them. "Drop your weapons." "Hands on your head," one shouted. The HOA squad froze, their fake badges glinting under the sun. The leader tried to laugh it off. "This is a misunderstanding. We're with neighborhood security." But before he could finish, my wife cut him off, her voice sharp and commanding. "They're not security. They're frauds. Check their IDs." The Real police moved fast, forcing the fake officers to the ground. And as they cuffed the leader, he glared at my wife and hissed, "You think this is over? You don't know who you're dealing with." Her answer was simple, and it sent chills through everyone listening. "Neither do you." The cuffs clicked tight around the leader's wrists, but he still tried to act tough, spitting words like poison. "You don't get it. I own this place. Every house, every street. The HOA works for me." His voice cracked with rage, but it only made the neighbors laugh bitterly. One man shouted from his porch, "You don't own anything. You couldn't even pay your last fine." Another neighbor chimed in, "We've had enough of you bullying us." Phones were pointed, evidence stacking higher by the second. The real officer leaned down and pulled the fake badge off the leader's chest. "This isn't even close to regulation. Where did you get this?" The man stayed silent, his eyes darting around like he was searching for an escape. My wife crouched to his level, her calm voice slicing deeper than any threat. "You forged documents. You pulled a weapon on civilians, and you impersonated police in front of a crowd. Do you realize what that means?" The leader sneered, trying to regain control. "They'll never lock me up. I have people backing me more powerful than you think." The officer glanced at my wife confused, almost asking silently who she really was. But she didn't answer him directly. Instead, she looked the leader dead in the eyes and said, "Funny thing about power. It disappears the moment people see the truth." The crowd erupted in cheers, neighbors shouting, "Arrest him. Lock him up." Kids peered from behind fences, eyes wide, watching the bully fall. But just when it seemed like the show was over, one of the cuffed men smirked and muttered under his breath, "She doesn't know. We weren't the only ones." The words hit like ice in my chest. If there were more, who else was coming? The air shifted instantly. The cheering neighbors went quiet, their smiles fading as the man's words sank in. My wife caught it too. Her posture stiffened, her eyes scanning the street like she expected danger to appear any second. The Real police looked confused. "What do you mean not the only ones?" One asked, yanking the smirking guy by the arm. He didn't answer. He just grinned wider, like he knew something we didn't. Then almost on cue, two black SUVs rolled slowly around the corner. Their windows were tinted, their movements deliberate. The crowd backed up toward the sidewalks, whispering nervously. One neighbor muttered, "Those aren't police vehicles." Another whispered, "What's going on here?" The leader on the ground straightened up as much as the cuffs would allow, his face twisting into a smug smile. "Told you. You have no idea who's really in charge." The SUVs stopped in the middle of the street, engines rumbling. The doors opened in perfect sync, and out stepped men in dark suits, sunglasses, and earpieces. They looked official, too official, the kind of presence that made people second-guess everything. One of the suited men flashed a badge quickly, too quickly, and said in a flat voice, "We'll take it from here." He gestured toward the cuffed HOA squad like they were his property. The real police hesitated, unsure, glancing at each other. One whispered, "Those don't look like any agency I know." My wife stepped forward, her voice calm, but edged with steel. "Don't hand them over. Those aren't federal agents." The lead suit tilted his head at her, cold and robotic. "And how exactly would you know that?" Her answer came without hesitation, sharp enough to silence everyone. "Because I've worked with the real ones, and you're not them." The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. The suited men froze at her words, their fake badges suddenly feeling heavier under every staring eye. The neighbors whispered louder now, phones zooming in on every detail. One of the real officers raised his gun slightly. "Ma'am, if you're right, we can't let them take custody." His voice shook with uncertainty. The leader of the HOA squad, still cuffed on the ground, laughed darkly. "You think you've won? She doesn't get it. They don't leave witnesses." My chest tightened, but my wife didn't move an inch. She looked at the fake agents like she was back on a battlefield. Her voice dropped low almost, daring them. "If you're here for a fight, you chose the wrong neighborhood." The lead suit smirked, signaling his men with a tiny flick of his hand. Instantly, two reached under their jackets, going for weapons. But my wife was already moving. In a blur, she pushed one of the real police out of the line of fire, then spun low and disarmed the first fake agent before his gun even cleared the holster. The crowd gasped, screaming, phones shaking as they caught it all. The second fake agent aimed at her back until a neighbor, an old veteran with a cane, shouted, "Not on my street," and hurled his walking stick straight into the man's face. The gun dropped, clattering across the asphalt. Cheers erupted from the crowd. The lead Sioux growled, "You don't know who you're messing with." But my wife stood tall, holding the seized weapon steady in her hand. Her eyes burned as she leveled it at him. Her words came out clear, deadly, certain, and unforgettable. "I'm Delta Force, and this is where your operation ends." The street erupted into chaos, but my wife controlled every second of it. The fake agents froze, realizing the crowd was against them. The cameras were everywhere, and the gun in her hands wasn't shaking. It was steady like she had done this 1,000 times before. The real officers finally snapped into action, shouting, "Get down. Drop your weapons." The fake agents hesitated, but my wife stepped forward, her voice cutting through their fear. "Do it now, because if you don't, every federal agency in this country will see this footage before sunrise." That broke them. One by one, the suits dropped their weapons and went to their knees. The neighbors roared in triumph, clapping and shouting, "Justice." "Lock them up." Kids on bikes rang their bells like a victory parade. The leader of the HOA squad thrashed against his cuffs, screaming, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." But no one listened anymore. The real police dragged him up, and for the first time, his fake authority was nothing but empty noise. My wife lowered the gun, handed it carefully to the nearest real officer, and spoke with quiet strength. "Charge them with impersonating law enforcement, armed assault and fraud. Don't let them walk out of this." The officer, still wide-eyed from what he had witnessed, nodded. "Yes, ma'am." As the last of the fake squad was hauled away, the neighbors surrounded us, thanking her, some with tears in their eyes. "You saved us," one mother whispered, holding her child close. Another neighbor said, "We finally feel safe again." My wife just shook her head, her voice low and steady. "I didn't do this for thanks. I did it because no one, fake police, fake HOA, or anyone else, has the right to threaten families on their own land." I looked at her, realizing once again the truth I sometimes forget. She wasn't just my wife. She was a warrior, still fighting, still protecting. And as the police cars pulled away, lights flashing in the night, one thought echoed through the crowd, carried on every whisper. They pointed a gun at the wrong woman.